Us now on Open Book is Dr. Rock Positano. He's a medical pioneer, medical genius, actually, in all things. He's an associate professor at Yale University, and he's an author. He's written two terrific books. The one we're going to talk about mostly is Street Smart, the primer for success in the new world. He also wrote a fantastic read, Dinner with DiMaggio, which I've given out that book. I've given out both your books, Doc. So Dinner with DiMaggio, every Italian I know gets a copy of that book. And your Street Smart book, I try to give out to all the graduates and all of our interns here and so forth. Now, you co-authored the book with your brother. You wrote the last book with him, right? Am I wrong? Yeah.
John, Anthony, John and I were always a very good 1-2 punch. We were two nice street kids that grew up in a really cool part of Brooklyn and had the advantage of having that sense of community where we all learned how to work with each other, how to sort of navigate situations, navigate the streets. And John and I have always worked together on projects, and we have a few good things in the works, but the DiMaggio project and the Street Smart project was really a lot of fun to do.
So why author a book on street smarts? I know the answer, but I want you to tell the crowd the answer.
Well, Anthony, this is the situation. I mean, it's a different world today. Okay. One of the things we realize is that the new definition of success is survival, because look what we went through with the last few years with the COVID epidemic. And I think what's happened is that a lot of the kids that are out there today, who are either under 20 years old or 25 years old, many of them didn't have the type of exposure like that you and I or my brother John had growing up, which was to be faced with very difficult circumstances that were very unusual, to be able to navigate a situation, make a plan, and be able to hopefully figure it out, And I think the book it's really written more for today's youth, the kids that are out there today. And of course, to me, anyone who's a youth is someone who's under 35 years old. Okay. So I think that's what makes this kind of special. And of course, it's not a self-help book though, that I want to make clear. I'm saying it's not a self-help book. I mean, there are hundreds of those books written by many people that you and I both know. Okay. This is more of a like a Bible or a new type of a situation where there's like a playbook. And this is a playbook that hopefully could be adapted to many people's situations out there. Now, of course,
there's life experiences in the book, Doc. I mean, that's what makes the book so great. I mean, you're learning by observation, right? Like, how many of us have to learn by observation? You and I are both readers. When I'm reading about Joe DiMaggio, I'm living vicariously through your stories, but I'm also learning about him, his morality, how he thought about people, how he treated his friends, the respect he had for himself and for others, right? And that's what you're sort of doing with Street Smart. You put a selection of vignettes of your buddies in the book, men and women, that articulate how they got to where they are. And there's wisdom in there that you can't get from a academic. You can't get from a classroom.
Well, yeah. And this is, Anthony, this is the classic university without walls scenario. I mean, again, growing up as we did, being outside, interacting with people, is a very unique education. But I think the biggest thing that we found with all of the participants, including yourself, of course, and we were very fortunate to have you written a very, very interesting, strong subject, was that intuition, instinct, these are things that tend to be the central theme between all of our participants, okay? And you may want to know, well, how did you pick all of these different types of people? Well, I said, basically, John and I sat down one day, Anthony, and we said, look, let's think of all the people we could put together that would never want to sit down and have dinner with each other at the same table, right? Because of the differences of opinion. You have conservatives, you have liberals, you have people who are in the middle, et cetera. But the one common denominator, the one common theme really centers around instinct. And this is something that you as a highly successful business person would appreciate, is that sometimes you have to learn to use your instinct. These are things that are not learned or taught at Harvard, Yale, Brown, NYU, et cetera. But these are things that you pick up from your interactions with people who are outside of the classroom. And that was the beautiful thing about Street Smart, is that we wanted to be able to sort of take the concept and bring it out to people because we're really concerned. I mean, about our youth being competitive. I mean, you look at all these other countries, you look at China, you look at the, overseas, you look at the, the Russian population, and a lot of these kids are really, they're tough kids, and these are people that had to overcome a lot of issues and a lot of, horrible circumstances. And what I'm concerned about is, are our kids up to the task? And we both know it's not about how you compute a formula. It's about how do you interact, how do you learn how to negotiate with people? And many of the things that we spoke about really are based, as you had mentioned, Anthony, on the fact that, I had a very privileged relationship with Joe DiMaggio. And what people don't realize about DiMaggio, he was the ultimate street smart guy. He wasn't just a phenomenal ball player, a phenomenal physical specimen in terms of his athleticism, etc. This man was brilliant, brilliant. I mean, he could run any company. I'll never forget one time we went down to Wall Street, and Dick Grasso at the time, I believe, was the head, and Joe was teaching the people in the Wall Street boardroom things about investing. I'll never forget that. And one of the guys turns to me and he says, "How does he know so much about this thing?" I said, "Well, look, this man is a brilliant man. He knows business. He knew entertainment. He knew obviously sports. He knew relationships. And being around Joe really helped to stimulate the fact that I saw Joe had a street smart that he grew up with when he was growing up in San Francisco, that we were able to develop as we grew up, in my case, or my brother Johnny's case, in Brooklyn." So I think in many respects, DiMaggio was an excellent, role model in so many ways, not just as an American hero or Marilyn Monroe's husband or 56 game hitting streak or, 9 World Series championships, but as a human being. One of the things was that the street smarts that John and I grew up with was it really enabled us to get that type of a relationship with Joe, because Joe didn't stand for too much BS. I mean, he was a very tough guy, but man, Anthony, he could spot a problem from a mile away. And of course, you think about today's baseball players, okay? Joe always felt that more games are won and lost in between the ears, mental mistakes, mental errors. We saw that only recently with some of our local baseball teams where mental errors come into play. And of course, that also is where our focus comes from, being street smart. So I think having that type of experience, Anthony, makes a big difference.
But you've applied it to your medical practice, though, as well, right? I mean, you said something to me once, sort of the you treat the patient, not the test. You look at the clinical situation and you make an evaluation. Less is more. You try not to do anything too invasive to somebody. This is really all from your upbringing and your street smarts, more than from a textbook, right?
Yeah, well, look, Anthony, a lot of people could learn a lot of different techniques. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could read an X-ray or an MRI or a CAT scan or whatever. But we found one of the things that we've always tried to apply here in our practice at the hospital was a sense of personal, making it personalized, which means, you're not, in my case, we have a foot and ankle practice here at Special Surgery. I mean, I always tell people this feeling I have is that, you're not just a foot and an ankle to me. There's a person attached to that body. And I think really part of our upbringing, being kids, growing up the way we did, taught us to interact and learn how to work with different types of people from different backgrounds, different beliefs, different thoughts. And look, Anthony, nobody's perfect. I mean, you and I both have experience. No matter sometimes how much we try to take the high road, people will always try to lowball us or try to take us down or et cetera. But one of the things we do learn is our ability to interact effectively with people from all different types of backgrounds. And I've done that very well, in our practice here at the hospital. And I mean, I could honestly say I have very, very few people that I dislike, that wound up not being in our practice after a while. But a big part of that has to do with, as you know, in your business, interpersonal relationships, which is key. They used to always say that, anything when you're dealing with success is 80% interpersonal, 20% academic. It's the same thing. Your ability to deal with people as you have very successfully done, has a lot to do with your ability to know how to interact with people from different backgrounds. And it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to like these people or agree with them, but it doesn't mean you can't, in this case, interact with them in an efficacious way, or in a way where you're able to do your job.
Well, I love the book for so many different reasons, but I want to talk about luck for a second, because I often think about it, but I thought you quantitatively and qualitatively assessed the role of luck in life. Tell us a little bit about that. Everybody has to have a little bit of a lucky break, right? You got a lucky break, didn't you, Rock? I know I've gotten several lucky breaks. Tell us a little bit about luck and its role in life.
Well, Anthony, I guess our Jewish friends call it mazel. Italians call it fortuna. All right. But I think the important thing about luck is that we have control over our ability to create a lucky situation, which means I don't believe in this thing where you walk out one day and, you say a prayer the day before that something good is going to happen to you and suddenly it happens. I believe that everything is set up from an internal perspective. We make our own luck. We create our own opportunities. It doesn't always work out that way. We don't always do it for that reason. But the way we interact with people, the way we interact with situations, in many respects, creates our own luck, etc. So I don't believe in pure luck. Okay, I don't. I do believe there's a small percentage of it, obviously, but I think people who are successful, like the people that we're very, very fortunate to have participate in our book, these were people that basically said they used their instincts to create their own luck, which of course led to other types of things. So again, that's what we mean. John and I mean more about when we're talking about qualitative and quantitative, but it's a big part of how we sort of deal with people and how we sort of set a situation up.
Doc, can you smell it on somebody? And what I mean by that. Can you smell the savoir-faire, the success? Let's say you meet a young kid, even if they're a patient of yours, or you're teaching at Yale, or interacting with somebody at dinner. Can you smell it? Can you smell it on somebody? And you know what I mean by the smell.
Yeah.
They got it. And so what is it? What are you picking up from your intuition?
Anthony, that's the street smart. That's the sixth sense that we learn how to develop when we're out there. They do not teach that in the classroom. I'm sorry. I don't care what school you go to, where you've been trained, who you've trained with. That comes from experience. That means that comes from stepping on landmines, from getting your legs blown off in situations. That comes from being, in a foxhole with somebody where things are going wrong and you're able to sort of hang in there and work a problem through, or to survive, etc. But the answer is yes. I mean, it's an instinctual thing. I could tell immediately what a person's vibe is. I walk into a room, I'll shake their hand. I pretty much can, and I don't say this in a bad way. I could size somebody up right away, and very, very rarely am I wrong. Okay, and I use the term, do I smell it on them? Yeah, I definitely smell it on them. And I think that's a big part of what makes a street smart education, meaning being out there, interacting with nice people, but also bad people. Learning from experiences, learning what doesn't feel right. I remember like yesterday when I was 10 years old, not feeling a good situation about someone I was interacting with. And like 40 years later, I had the same feeling about someone and I turned out being right. But the instinct, like you said, that smell factor is definitely there.
Yeah.
There's no question about it.
This is all stuff that I have so much respect, and I admire you so much. And you're my doctor. You're my son Nick's doctor. You're all my friends' doctors. And even though you're at hospital special surgery for medicine around podiatry and a surgeon, I rely on you for everything. And I call you when I got like a hiccup. I'm like, all right, let me call Rock, But you got all these people that do that with you. So let's talk about some of the people that are in your book. And thank you for including me, by the way. You gave me an opportunity to tell a little bit of my upbringing and my story. But you've got Dr. Tony Fauci in the book, Representative Peter King, another friend of mine, Arianna Huffington. Tell us about some of the people. Why did you pick them? What did you think they had to add to the street smart narrative?
Well, again, I think a lot of it, Anthony, has to do with the fact that these are people who have been unusually talented, unusually capable, unusually successful. Maybe not by our standards sometimes. Obviously, we may not agree with some of the things they may say or do, etc. But I mean, they all had that same mojo, that ability to be able to navigate hostile waters, okay, and to seize an opportunity and create an opportunity. And you look at someone like Dr. Fauci, for instance. I mean, scientifically, the man is still brilliant. I mean, he came from a very, good upbringing. His parents were pharmacy reps and owners in the old neighborhood, so to speak. Ariana came from a certain type of a background that was a foreign background with a European flair. I mean, Peter King, as you know, is our, and I mean this in a nice way. He's our backyard guy, the guy that we used to hang out with. And I think the reason why we chose some of these people was because of the fact that they were successful, but not necessarily in your typical conventional ways. So again, defining success, as we said earlier, is now survival, because this is what we need to be able to prepare for, which is why it's so important that as parents, Anthony, we're all protective. I'm sure you're very protective of your kid. I mean, we never want, I hate to say this, we never want our kids to go through what we went through. Okay. But what I'm really asking you, and you're a successful parent and a successful person in many respects. I mean, are we really helping these kids by protecting them from all of the landmines and the potholes that we had to endure during our lifetime? Okay. And I think that's really what the concern is here, is that we need to alert our parents. I mean, the people who come before us, or are the people that we were basically raised with. Okay. How are we able to, enable them to help these kids to be able to learn how to develop some of these instincts? Okay. Because they are instinctual. Okay. There's no question about that.
Doc, I've always been dying to ask you this, and now I'm going to get the opportunity to share it with all my listeners. You could have been anything. You're talking about DiMaggio, but that's you. You could have been an executive at one of these companies. You could have been running a CNN or a Wall Street company. Tell us about you and your love for medicine and what drew you into the practice of medicine.
Well, look, I think, when I was growing up, Anthony, I was very, very active with people. I used to run for political office. I was the only pre-med at NYU that won higher office. And the reason why is because I think it had to do with the ability to work with people and to serve and to make a difference. And I think there's nothing more rewarding or personally satisfying than to be able to help someone who has a physical problem of some type. That is the most empowering reward you could ever get. You cannot put a price tag on that. And I think what always endeared me and brought me in was that connection of being able to listen to someone who may be in trouble and help them to figure out what needs to be done. Okay. And I think that was the allure. I mean, look, and I was interesting, and I was in the business world as well. When I came out of Yale, I started a company at Sony under Jeff Sagansky at the time, who was the executive vice president for Sony Corporation, called Sony Health and Entertainment. Okay. Where we were basically talking about all the things that you're seeing now about, these virtual bicycle rides when you're on your Peloton bike, you're going through the glaciers. This is all stuff that we were working on back in the early 1990s. Okay. Mm-hmm. But you know what? There was a certain lack of satisfaction, because at the end of the day, this was becoming more about, a corporate thing, making a ton of money for a huge company, and less about interacting with people and really making a difference in their life. So I think that's really the big difference here, is that when you are a healer, when you are one-on-one with someone, when you're able to help them, which most cases we're able to do it. Sometimes we don't do it, or we don't do it maybe as well as people would think we would like to do it. There's something very powerful about that, and, in my case, I had a lot of inspiration too. I was always enamored with Leonardo da Vinci, which is really the basis of our practice here at Hospital for Special Surgery. It's based upon using the foot and the ankle as the foundation for everything. like the lower extremity, the knee, the hip, the back, the neck, the shoulder. And Da Vinci was able to think out of the box, many years ago, and he was able to show how being able to help a person in one area, such as a foot and an ankle, which is so important, is able to help the person be active and mobile and et cetera. Because, Anthony, quality of life is based upon the ability to do things that are important. And as doctors, we've all concurred that the two most important things for quality of life is number one and number two, the ability to see and the ability to walk. So I think in that respect too, that's what also drew me to a foot and ankle practice, because I realized how important being able to walk from point A to point B was. So again, that was something that also has to do with our upbringing, because when we were out in the street, we realized that the ability to get from point A to point B was so invaluable.
There's something else there, though, right? Let's go to Da Vinci for a second. There's and medicine is proving this. There's a mind-body connection, right? The mind is not separated from the body. The mind impacts the health of the body, and the body impacts the health of the mind. There's a holistic thing going on. But there's something magical about the foot, though. Am I wrong? I mean, it is tied into the other organs. It's tied into the brain. Tell us a little bit about that. And this is one of the things that you've said to me, and again, fully disclosed, I'm one of your patients. You don't like operating on people's feet because of that connection. Do I have that wrong?
No, you're totally correct. And what people, again, don't realize is that, with all the types of orthopedic surgeries that could be performed in any type of a hospital, we're talking about knee replacements, hip replacements, spinal fusions, the most difficult in terms of outcomes are foot and ankle operations. And the reason why is not because the technique of our colleagues isn't top notch. It's because of the nature of what the foot and the ankle has to endure. It is by far, as we said, the foundation of the body. So, it's one of those situations where once you change that architecture, Anthony, as Da Vinci taught us, you're changing everything, which means, your foot may look better. You may be able to, to place your foot inside a Manolo Blahnik high heel. Okay. But what's really happening is that foot really working to serve the rest of the body. So what I found, and that's where the Joe DiMaggio connection came in. It was that I can remember having dinner with Joe on so many occasions and him complaining to me that, he lost 5 years of his career because he had a heel spur operation that he should have never had. And he, in many respects, inspired me, along with Da Vinci, to go into this area of specialization because, he said, from an athletic point of view, if your feet don't work, you're really in trouble, as we're finding out right now with certain New York Yankee stars, okay? And I think the importance here is that, the foot is the first part of the body that makes a contact with the ground. It's also, I think, a spiritual thing. I think it's one of the things you mentioned. Da Vinci always felt that the foot was attached to everything, okay? And also, if you look at, not that I'm trying to get biblical on this, but if you look at, like, the history of religion, I mean, the foot is very symbolic, people would wash your feet to show signs of affection and love and respect and, gratitude and loyalty. And I think there's that also connection, too, where the foot has in many respects, a mystical quality about it. And, people have said, well, gee, do you believe in reflexology? And, as you know, reflexology supposedly has to do with different parts of your arch, Anthony, being connected to different body parts. Well, you don't know. You don't know. And many years ago, there was a Nobel laureate here at Rockefeller University named Professor Paul Greengard. And Paul and I spoke about this, and Paul felt that there was a connection neurologically and with the foot and how it sort of connects with all parts of the body. And I had pointed out to him that, the foot is so well connected to other body things that, yeah, there is a spiritual as well as a physiological component to it. So, that was one of the funnier situations I was involved with when I had this Nobel laureate telling me that, I think there's something to what Da Vinci did say about the foot and the ankle. So in many respects, that's one of the reasons why so many people now hold this part of the body in such high esteem.
Well, I love talking to you. I could talk to you forever. I want to go to Dinner with DiMaggio for a
Sure,
second.
sure.
There's so many great stories in that book. It's a, somebody says to me, "Well, why would you read Dinner with DiMaggio?" I would say, "Well, it's a book about friendship.
Right.
Ultimately, that's what the book is about. It's a book about how to be a friend, what is a true friend, and how do people interact with each other at the highest level." I don't want to ruin the book for people because I want people to go out there and buy it. But let's talk about Muhammad Ali for a second,
Right.
and Marilyn Monroe, if you don't mind. Two people that are in that book and their interactions with the Yankee Clipper.
Well, look, I mean, Joe, people didn't realize that Joe was a tremendous boxing fan, and he had a tremendous amount of respect for Muhammad Ali. And I had asked him at one point, I had a family member that was killed in Vietnam. Okay. And, Joe and I were talking about boxing, and he brings up Muhammad Ali. And I said, Joe, I really don't want to talk about Muhammad Ali. This is a guy that didn't, go to war. And of course, at that time, I didn't know half of the reasons why, he was an objector for the right reasons, because of his religion, his beliefs, etc. But, DiMaggio says to me, Doc, you got it all wrong. If you're going to be a professional person, you cannot judge a person and their ability and their craft based upon your personal beliefs. Okay. And he says, I know you may have issues with Muhammad Ali because of your cousin. However, your framework of how you're judging him as a professional is all wrong. And I thought about that. I said, he's right. So I apologized. I said, Joe, you're right about that. And then he went into how Muhammad Ali did so many wonderful things for kids, for inner city kids. And he gave me a whole different perspective. But he basically, in a nice way, Anthony, he slapped me in the side of the head. Okay. Basically, it's like sitting at the dinner table with your uncle, your father, and suddenly you get whacked. You know what I mean? And he was right.
I've been there, Rock. I've been
you know
there.
what I mean. Okay. Yeah. I'm sure you and I have
I've been whacked by friends and relatives, not just relatives.
You know what that feels like. Okay. But I think what I was saying, I developed a whole much more profound respect for Ali after Joe put it into perspective that you need to separate whatever personal feelings you may have, whether those personal feelings are justified or not, from looking at a person's professional behavior. So, yeah. So there's no question about that, Joe. That was one of the lessons of Dinner with DiMaggio. Joe basically teaching me that you need to be careful what criteria you use when you're judging a person in their profession and what impact they may have on other people, etc. In terms of Marilyn Monroe, look, I mean, Joe was amazed with her. I mean, Joe, one of the things Joe would always say was that people didn't realize how brilliant she was. That she could, Anthony, she could read a script and memorize the whole script in 2 hours. I mean, it was kind of funny because, everyone has this impression that she was, maybe not the most highly intelligent person, which clearly was not the case. And Joe had a tremendous amount of respect for her because of her craft. She was that talented. She had an amazing ability to assimilate information, to memorize it, etc. And it was kind of funny because Joe would tell me that many times Marilyn would bring a script home and Joe would read the script first. Okay. And many times Joe would tell her rather, well, I don't think this is a good script for you, But the funniest though was one morning, Anthony, where Joe and I are having coffee at this restaurant, which is no longer there on Madison Avenue, called Gardenia, which was on Madison between 67th and 68th. And he starts talking to me about movies and about, actors and actresses. So he turns to me and it was something really surreal. He says to me, well, Doc, he goes, I was married to 2 actresses. So I'm saying, no, you're kidding me. Really, Joe? You were back. He goes, yeah, I was married to this gal named Dorothy Arnold. She was a showgirl. And then I was married to this nice gal named Marilyn Monroe. And I'm sitting there saying you got to be kidding me. But in a funny way, because, he didn't assume anything. But he had an immense respect for people who were in the arts field. And, I'll never forget this. One of the times, we went out with some of some artistic people. One of them was Woody Allen. Woody Allen had a crazy thing for Joe in terms of respecting him as a ball player, and it was his idol. And Woody and Joe were sitting at the table talking. And Joe was telling Woody, who was the director of this film, who was the assistant, and then Joe gets up to go to the men's room, and then Woody says to me, he goes, Rock, I don't believe how much Joe knows about movies. And then I had to remind him too. I said, look, Woody, Joe was married to 2 actresses, but it was his knowledge though of the arts and movies was really amazing and phenomenal. So, but going, not to digress, but his love for Marilyn Monroe was unbelievable. And you could see that the man always had a lot of pain. And anytime she would come up, he would have that, we used to call it the 2,000-yard stare, where you could just see he would just disconnect. And it was horrible. It was horrible. You could clearly see, he was totally in love and devoted to her. And, which was a horrible thing for him.
You tell some beautiful stories in the book. It's really one of the great books about friendship and relationships. Now I'm at the point in this podcast, Dr. Rock, where I read out 5 words. Okay. I did this with Governor Christie earlier in the week. He gave me 5 words back. I've done it with other people, and they give me paragraphs. You can give me a sentence, a word, something's going to come to mind. I'm going to say the word and you respond. You ready?
Shoot.
Mindset.
Way of living.
It's important, right?
Very.
Have the right mindset, right?
Always. Way of living.
And dealing with success and failure, you're going to have the right mindset. Am I right, sir?
Always.
Okay. Luck.
You create your own luck.
Right. But we all have to have it, right? We all have to catch that break somewhere, right?
Look, we all need a little break every once in a while, Anthony. No question about that.
Success.
Survival.
Yeah.
The new definition of success is survival.
That is so good, Doc. That is so good. Experience.
Hard work. Take nothing for granted. Don't take the easy way out.
Right. Do the work, right? You got to do the work.
There's no such thing as being...
There's no shortcut. We both know that, right?
There's no anointing from the top of the mountain that suddenly, Anthony, you wake up one day and you say, wow, I'm so much more intelligent than I was yesterday. It doesn't work that way.
If I say the word DiMaggio, you say what?
Class.
Perfection. He really was something else, though, right? Impeccably dressed. He had...
Anthony, I've seen so many people, and there was only one person that could literally stop a room dead. It was Joe. I mean, we once were in Beverly Hills. We went into one of those fancy Monday night places. I forgot what it was. And I'll never forget, we walked into the restaurant, and inside that restaurant was Gregory Peck, Jack Lemmon, Joan Collins. I mean, the who's who of Hollywood. And we walk into that restaurant, and it went dead silent. You could not hear a pin drop because he had that type of an effect on people. I'll never forget the owner saying to me, Doc, we have a lot of famous people that come into this restaurant, but I've never seen a room go completely silent and frozen than tonight when you brought Joe DiMaggio in here. That's the type of an effect this man had on people.
Well, I remember him. I mean, I didn't, unfortunately, I wish I knew you, Dr. Rock, in the 90s, when Joe was around. I mean, I saw him out one night at a fundraiser, and he was so kind to the people that came up to him at that fundraiser. Of course, I was, I probably didn't have the, I think my self-confidence grew as I got older, Doc. I was in awe of Mr. DiMaggio, so I didn't go over there to say hello to him. You know what I mean? I wish I did, but but he was so kind to the people. I just remember watching him handle the people with a level of kindness,
Well, he had that ability, though, again, to be able to transcend all of these things. He could be with a president of the United States one minute. He could be with a 10-year-old kid the next minute. He could be with, a Wall Street titan the next minute. And to watch him navigate from one situation to another was an unbelievable master class. And that was one of the things that we were exposed to. And I would ask him, and he said the same thing. He goes, look, Doc, when I was growing up in San Francisco, we grew up very poor. I had to learn how to navigate from place to place, from situation to situation. So again, but what made him so special was that he could just transcend and just go from one situation to another without any problems, effortlessly, flawlessly. And that was the amazing thing about it. And by the way, one of the things about hanging out with Joe, Anthony, was that I knew who he would like, and equally important, I knew who he would not like. That was important.
Right.
You know, I could tell right away, this is trouble. This is trouble, you know.
Right.
Yet I could tell, like you said, you know, you used that term earlier, you could smell it on someone. Well,
right.
After hanging out with Joe for all those years and going to literally, you know, thousands of breakfasts, lunches, and dinners, I got a scent right away of who he would like, which, by the way, Anthony, didn't mean this is a person who I wouldn't necessarily like or dislike. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, no, he was particular. You wrote about it. Doc, what's next? What are you going to write about next?
Well, you know, Anthony, I you know, we do a lot of work here. You know, as you know, my son joined the practice. He finished up his program at Yale. His name is Rock also, which is maybe a curse for him, poor thing, because, you know, he's a really super smart, hardworking kid. And we're working on some really, really great research projects that involve foot and ankle, that involve non-surgical interventions, because we really feel we're about 25 years ahead of our time, because we started, you know, not him, obviously, because he's a lot younger than I am, but we started this whole movement of non-surgical many, many years ago, before most groups did. And actually, our practice at HSS was the first non-surgical foot and ankle practice probably in the world. And again, we could thank Mr. DiMaggio for that, which is why, you know, part of our center is called the Joe DiMaggio Center, because, again, what ended Joe's career was a foot surgery that should have never happened in the first place. So in many respects, we use that experience as our ability to connect with the public. And don't get me wrong, Anthony, when someone needs an operation on a foot or an ankle after all non-surgical things are not successful, look, we tell people, listen, go see our colleague down the hall. You need surgery, period. But I think, though, you know, DiMaggio taught us that the importance of ambulation in terms of your daily lifestyle, your quality of living, your quality of life, and in his case, athletic performance. I mean, it's the most important part of one of the most important parts of the body.
Well, we agree, Doc. I'm looking forward to your writings. I'm looking forward to coming to see you. I'm very grateful to you. You've written 2 amazing books. The first one was Dinner with DiMaggio, and the one out right now is Street Smart, the primer for success in the new world. Doc, thank you so much for joining us today on Open Book.
Anthony, you're a great man. And listen, again, you've done wonderful things. And, you know, at the end of the day, when the book is written, people are going to be really appreciative of all the great things that you've done.
Well, sweetie. That's sweetie. It means a lot to me coming from you. You know that.
Well, let's face it, you've earned that distinction. You come from great people, great family, the right work ethic. And let's face it, you're loyal to your friends, which is the most thing.
Well, amen. Well, amen. I say the same thing about you in spades. See, if you were there right now, I'd be hugging and kissing you, Doc, right? Like us Italians do to each other, right?
Hey, listen, right? But we actually mean it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
You know, we actually mean it.
You can't be uptight. You got to hug and kiss people. Too bad.
Listen,
you know?
even these days, you know, Anthony.
These days, I don't care. What are they going to do? You know what I mean?
Well, listen, it's a pleasure and honor to be on the same stage with you.
I'll come up and see you, brother. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Open Book. Now, I've been seeing all kinds of comments on YouTube, X, LinkedIn, you name it. I'm loving the feedback, and I'm also loving lots of the questions. So we thought we would do a Ask Me Anything Q&A here on Open Book. I've compiled a whole list of questions from viewers, listeners, fans, not so much fans. You know, there's a whole combination of different things going on here. As always, I want to thank you for tuning into the show. It means a lot to all of us here at Open Book. I thought that this would be a good idea to do a question and answer session. Let's try to do it once a month. I think it'll be great for everybody, keep everybody engaged. And if you haven't hit the subscriber button on YouTube and you're listening to this, please do it. It's somewhere. Just press the button for me. And let's get started, if that's okay. How do you think the Trump presidency will end? This is from Vic16509. What happens after Trump? So, listen, I'm pessimistic about the Trump presidency, obviously, because I think it's not starting well. I think he's acting typically erratic. He's talking about imposing tariffs. We'll have to see if those tariffs actually get imposed, or if the Democrats and some of the people on his economic team that are very smart group of people will stop him from doing these things. But there's a destructive streak in Donald Trump. And so it's either going to be a morass of dysfunction, or they're going to clip him and neuter him somehow. They'll figure out a way to do that. And that could be coming very quickly. So the Trump effectiveness, meaning Donald J. Trump himself, his effectiveness ends March, April, possibly May of 2026. You may be asking me why I say that. Well, that's when the midterm election season starts. And there will be Republicans, if he's not doing well, that will want to run away from him as they seek their incumbency. But he's a lame duck. And unless you're telling me we're going to change the Constitution, I know there's some people in America that want to do that, to allow Trump to run again. I think it may be very unlikely that that happens. And so what ends up happening with lame duck presidents is they get close to that congressional midterm, they fizzle. But that's what I think happens. Let's go to the next question. This is Davies Gaming. Okay, here's a dumb question, but the New Yorker social ladder, etc., came to mind. How did your social life hold up after Donald? What a great question. And Davey, I'm going to be very blunt. I have absolutely no idea. You know, I live in the suburbs, and I tell people about myself, I'm a comfortable outsider. So if somebody wants to invite me to a premiere, or they want to invite me to their house for a cocktail party, that's great. If they don't want to do that, I honestly don't give a shit. I don't even know if I'm allowed to curse on this podcast, but that's the truth. And it's interesting because in life, if you are an outsider, I guess the first thing you have to do is you have to recognize that you're an outsider. And then you have to ask yourself, am I a comfortable outsider or an uncomfortable outsider? So Donald Trump is a representation of an uncomfortable outsider. So it used to really bother him that he couldn't get invited to a Upper East Side salon for some kind of ritzy party of well-known names, or get invited to certain charity events and things like that. I honestly don't care. So I don't know how my social life is going, but maybe, I don't know. Maybe my wife would know, but she doesn't care either. So in any event, cheers back to you, my friend. Sort of a lame answer, right? But I'm a little bit more introverted and a little more secluded than people would probably think. Okay. Anthony Scaramucci. This is from Spadina 393. And Anthony Scaramucci, it isn't clear today whether you are a Republican or a Democrat or something else. Please comment. So I am something else. I'm definitely not a Republican or a Democrat at this point in my life. I am pissing off everybody. I'm enraging everybody. And I find on social media, you either have to be hard left or hard right to gain fans. And if you say something positive about Donald Trump, where there are, believe it or not, some positives, people flip out on me. And if you say something negative, of course, people flip out as well. So there's a flip out one way or the other. But I don't care at this point. I'm just going to tell people what I think. And it's very hard to pigeonhole me now. I guess I'm an old school Republican that has pretty socially liberal views about social politics, not fiscal politics. So that's where I stand. But thank you for the question, Spadina. Mark Hardman. Does Biden have a legacy, or was he just a placeholder? So I think Biden does have a legacy. I think his legacy is a disastrous one. I think he goes down pretty close to James Buchanan in terms of who he was as a president. There are 45 people to hold that job. Of course, Trump has held it twice. Grover Cleveland has held it twice. The only two that have lapsed the term and then got back into the presidency. So there's 45 people that have held the job. I think he's in the bottom five. Disaster. And I'll say three quick things. Number one, nobody left the Biden presidency. That's a sign that Joe Biden himself wasn't making any decisions. I mean, a lot of people around him had power, and they were reluctant to give up the power. Usually you have turnover in every administration. There was none here. Number two, they lied to us. They told us that he was cognitively with it, and obviously it became self-evident in June of 2024 that he wasn't. And he did a horrific job of handling what I would say is the most important thing that a leader can do, and that is to transfer power. The intergenerational transfer of power he flummoxed. Him and Lady Macbeth, Jill Biden, stayed too long. and they didn't give their party a chance to beat Donald Trump. So I think his legacy is one of a disaster, is my opinion. Let's go to Melissa Higgins. Melissa, I do know Melissa Higgins, so I'm not sure if this is the Melissa Higgins that I know, but with your unique perspective at the crossroads of politics, finance, and media, what do you believe leaders in these arenas often get wrong about earning and sustaining the public trust? They're trying too hard, Melissa. Most of these people are weather vanes. And so, take a look at BlackRock, for example. They were going hard ESG. Then they realize that doesn't work. And then they spin this way and then they spin that way. And I think you can't do that. You just have to stick to something. Some people will like you for it. Other people will dislike you for it. What difference does it make? You're not going to please everybody. Even Mother Teresa had her detractors. And I think to really earn public trust is to stand for something and to be principled. It doesn't mean you don't change your mind when facts change. Of course, you should do that. But you got to stand for something. And if you stand for something, even if people disagree with you, I think they trust you. Let's go to the next one. This is George Stamatis. Hopefully I'm saying that right. George, the question is, given your unique journey from founding Skybridge Capital to your brief tenure, you could have also said disastrous, George, that would have been fine, as White House Communications Director, and your subsequent outspoken criticism of President Trump, how do you reconcile your initial support for Trump with your later opposition? And what lessons can you share about the importance of adaptability and integrity in both business and politics? This is such a great question. And so I can't really reconcile it, so I don't even try to. I was a garden variety Republican. Trump asked me to go work for him. I had known him. I made certain assumptions about Trump that were not true. I think all of us and even his supporters today like to see certain things in him and like to disregard other things. I often tell people that Trump is a kaleidoscope. You go into the aperture, you're looking at him, you see something you want to see, and then, of course, Trump himself is the one that's turning the lens, and he's constantly turning that lens, and I guess it just became too much for me, actually. I just looked at the totality of what he represented, and the breaking of our societal norms is why I started speaking out against him. There are some things I agree with him on still to this day, but I do think you have to be important. I do think you have to be adaptive, and I do think you have to be honest with yourself. If you get something wrong, own it, and don't be afraid to shift a position or two. Winston Churchill was a liberal; he became a conservative. Ronald Reagan was a liberal, became a conservative. People have gone back and forth. I think it's okay to do that. Jim Spielman, during your time close to Washington, D.C., what astounded you the most, good and bad? So I think what astounded me the most was the petty nastiness. I didn't expect the opposition drops. I didn't expect the late night meetings between staffers and journalists, where the purpose of the meeting was to rat on their colleagues, whether it was inside the House, the Senate, or the White House. It's just not something I would have done in the corporate world. Remember, I built my own company, and so people that acted like assholes, I fired them. And so we tried to get to a no asshole theory, but unfortunately in Washington, there's just incredible petty assholes. So that surprised me the most. You think people are on your team, but they're actually not. But the good thing, what is the good thing about Washington? Well, the good thing about Washington is the setup, meaning the Constitution actually has worked pretty successfully for 250 years and has provided enough of a check and balance that no one person could take too much power. Trump is trying to test that now, but I predict he'll fail at that. Thank you for that question, Jim Spielman. Okay, this is Clark Ching Royals Rocks. I do love these names, so I got to say a big shout out to Clark Ching. You are 5 years older than me, so how come I look 10 years older than you? I don't know, brother. I don't know. Are you drinking? Are you smoking? What are you doing? Don't drink. Don't smoke. Stay out of the sun. Drink a lot of water. And a little Botox here and there can't hurt a person, okay? And just you pin your forehead back a little bit, and you'll look a little bit younger. But stop drinking, I think, is the number one thing. Jamie Tulip. Okay. Jamie Tulip, ADV, DIPFA, PETR. Okay, I don't know, man, but that's I don't know what that even means. But what has your career success taught you about America? Are you optimistic about future generations, and will the opportunity to benefit the way you have? I am optimistic. I think you have to maintain your optimism about America. America fixes itself. We've been through a civil war, fought 2 world wars in the 20th century. We've been through the Cold War. We're now having another internal struggle. It's not a hot civil war, but it's sort of a tribal one. And I think America will repair itself. We just have so many smart people, such an interesting flat society that's generally free. And I think you'll see a renewal of America that'll be of great benefit to future generations. But thank you for that, Jamie. All right, let's keep going. So we're on to Michael Fyodorov, P.Eng. All right, Michael, is Elon Musk just successful or a robber baron? What does he have a monopoly on? There's lots of competition on EVs, space, social media, and communications. How would you break up his holdings? It's interesting. So I think what Michael means is, how would I analyze the holdings? I don't think you could break up Elon's holdings because, to your point, he doesn't really have a monopoly in anything. And so the FTC, he wouldn't meet the threshold tests of the Sherman Antitrust Act to break him up. But having said that, I do think he's incredibly successful, and I do think he did something that you need to do if you want to get to $200 billion. You have to create some cult-like status about you. As an example, Warren Buffett created this sort of status for himself in the 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s. He has it still today at age 94, but there's sort of this media halo. Now, you could say that Musk is controversial. Many in the media now dislike him because he sided with Donald Trump, but they don't attack his business acumen. They don't attack his business prowess. And so there's still a halo on his holdings. And of course, like him or dislike him, he's one hell of an engineer, and he's one hell of an execution-oriented person. Just look what he did with XAI. In a very short period of time, he built that into a very stiff competitor to OpenAI. And so for those reasons, I have a lot of respect for him. I'm in awe of him. I guess what I would say to you is one of the big colossal mistakes of 2024 is allowing him to move over to Donald Trump. He was with the Democrats. I blame Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, and I blame Gary Gensler for that. These guys didn't handle Silicon Valley or Elon Musk properly, and they lost a big money spigot, and they lost a big influencer. Okay, let's go to David Gagare. I think I'm pronouncing it right. Is the oligarchy that seems to be taking place in the United States around DJT a reality or an exaggeration? Is it a threat to stability and the open democracy that we used to have prior to DJT? Is it reversible in the future post DJT? So I'll answer the question and say that we have an oligarchy rising. It's a bipartisan oligarchy. It's not just around Donald Trump. There's billionaires associated with the Democratic Party that give them billions as well. We made a decision, the Supreme Court did at least anyway, in January of 2010, to create a scenario in the United States where money really matters in these elections. They can dump unlimited amounts of money into these political action committees, a result of which, if you look at the congressional legislation and the legislative agenda since 2010, it is skewed to big business, big pharma, big food, big oligarchy. Lots of these companies would have been broken up by the Reagan administration. They won't be broken up by a Democrat or a Republican due to the amount of lucre, the amount of money that's going into the campaigns of the people that make these decisions. So it's reversible, but I do believe it would require us to fix Citizens United. Daniel DiGeronimo Zing. Mr. Scaramucci, I generally want to hear your thoughts on this matter. How can we restore the power of politicians to the voters rather than having control by corporations and donations? It appears the U.S. has become a nation influenced more by corporate interests than by the welfare of its citizens. So, again, this relates to Citizens United, very famous case, January of 2010. Justice Anthony Scalia said, you have a First Amendment right to use your money in the political process any way you see fit. And so you can't support the candidate by giving them excess of whatever the limits are in campaign finance, but you can support that candidate's ideas unlimitedly through a political action. You could dump $2, $3, $4, $10 billion into an idea, whereas Elon Musk did to help Donald Trump get elected. He pumped $250 billion into the campaign in the last 2 months. So how do you fix it? You'd have to have meaningful campaign finance reform. You'd have to revoke Citizens United. There was a very famous case called Plessy versus Ferguson, where the Supreme Court made a decision that black and white people could be treated separate but equally. And so the clause in the case was separate but equal facilities for blacks and whites. That was a terrible outcome because you had huge discrimination, particularly in the South. You had restaurants where only served white people, schools where the whites were on one side, the blacks were on the other. So terrible situation. It took 80 years to reverse Plessy versus Ferguson with something called Brown versus Board of Education, which required the integration and made the social contract a little bit fairer. So we need to end the separate but equal democracy, which is creating this sort of oligarchic-like behavior. So really good questions. Let's keep going. Luke DiCio. My question is about the U.S.-Europe relationship under Trump. It has been said left and right that sooner or later they will grow tired of the U.S. Republicans and drift towards China, but China can't and won't protect Europe from Russia. So the question is, isn't Donald Trump right in negotiating hard, knowing that the counterparty has nowhere to go? Isn't that quite literally the art of the deal? So, Luke, it is and it isn't, because things change. And what do we know about our relationships? There's fluidity in our relationships, and there's a give and take. There's a bilateral nature to our relationships. But the United States went to Europe and said, let us handle certain things. And if you let us handle these certain things, there'll be certain trade rights and there'll be certain ways we communicate and we ally ourselves with each other. And Donald Trump's going back on that sort of 80-year agreement. And so you can say that that agreement was unfair, but the way he's going about it is forcing unnatural alliances. And so, unfortunately, the adage is often true. What goes around comes around. If you want to put a big tariff on somebody like Canada, well, someday the United States may need Canada for something. If you want to sever our relationship with Europe or force them to increase their defense spending or threaten them from the United States, I'm not exactly sure what we're trying to solve by that. I think Trump's got his people believing that we've been aggrieved by Europe. But again, I submit to everybody listening, we were 4% of the world's population, roughly 25% of the world's gross domestic output in 1982. It's 43 years later, we have the same market share. 4% of the world's population, 25, 26% of the GDP, yet there's been rising living standards around the world. Our strategy of embracing the world and aligning ourselves with Western liberal democracies has worked for the country and has generally made us a richer country. Now, we can improve the living standards of lower and middle income people with better policy. We can certainly do that. And that's been one of the big dilemmas that's led to the rise of Donald Trump. But this strategy, I think, is going to come back to haunt us. I don't think hammering the Europeans is the answer. So Raj Bhatia, first of all, nice suit. Second of all, what 3 books would you recommend? And only 3 books for my son, who's now a sophomore at NYU, studying finance and wants to be just like you. So Raj is a personal friend. Hopefully he's listening to this. Raj, I know you forever. We've been so helpful to each other over the years, and I can't believe your son is that old. But the 3 books I would recommend to your son are The Intelligent Investor. It's a must-read. A Random Walk on Wall Street by Burton Malkiel, Malkiel. Have to read that if you're going to go into finance. And the last one is written about 30 years ago. It's called The Making of the American Capitalist by Roger Lowenstein. And I would implore you to please read that book. It's about Warren Buffett. And I would say that that book added millions of dollars to my net worth, and just in terms of understanding how Mr. Buffett thinks about things. Okay, Jacob Sloan, what are your best pieces of advice for a recent graduate or young professional in 2025 on how to navigate their career? Jacob, I think it's very simple in the beginning. I would get there early, man, and I would leave later than everybody. And I would look around and I would say, who are the people here that I want to be the most like? And whoever that is, do your very best to get to know that person. Because I'll tell you right now, if you do that, good things will happen. There's something about human beings. It's a mimetic nature of human beings. You try to act like the people that you look up to. You start to carry their influences and their habits. You start to do way better in life. And of course, if you're a young man or woman, remember in your 20s, you can do things like nothing but observe. You don't have to be in a super rush. You got to take your 30s seriously, however, but you don't have to be that crazy in your 20s. That's my best advice. Okay, that's a wrap on Ask Me Anything, an open book special. We'll see you next month. We're going to do this every single month. We'll try to get to every question. We appreciate the questions and the feedback. Please subscribe. We need subscribers. And we wish you great success, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.